So much controversy and a lot of deception. You don't know who's coming through with the light and reflection, and whose mouth is mumbling, trick, knowledge, deceptive. Shabazz, break it down with the proper perspective. Yeah.
What's going on, everybody? How y'all doing? It's your brother Shabazz coming back to you live on this Thursday. My apologies for not being here on Tuesday. Some things was going on that could not be helped. Oh, and now I'm having an analogy attack. Great. So, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, thank you for tuning in. If you are getting here, peace to Mr. K, the Pan-African Terminator is me. That's my nickname. Peace given to me by Mr. K. And I say right back at you, bruh. The Pan-African Library is in the house. Oh, yeah, y'all gonna have to excuse me a little here and there. I am having a bit of an allergy attack. I may have to run and clear this out. But we are trying to finish up our discussion, our analysis on Professor Small's Dana with the Data, Tariq Nasheed, the FBA, delineation, and all of that. So hold on to your seats, ladies and gentlemen. We are gonna get it started. I'm gonna play a video, add to the stage, and we'll just pick up right where we left off. If you are here on any of the other platforms, you may be watching me or listening on Facebook, Twitch, or TikTok. You do not get the full experience unless you're on YouTube, where I share the screen and play the videos. You're not going to be able to hear it. But if you want to stick on the platform that you like other than YouTube, I appreciate you for still sticking around. I'll try to give you some shout outs when I can see. Shout out to Gothic Minister. Shout out to G1 Flyer. So keep the lights, keep the hearts coming, keep the clicks and all that other stuff. Like, share, and subscribe. We're gonna start with this. We'll pick back up, I should say, with this clip where Dana is talking about Professor Small's his lens, his Pan-African lens. So we're gonna pick up with that. I'm gonna hit that play button once I find it. And then we're going to come back and have a brief discussion.
Playing this clip here for when he arrives to the CIA COINTEL comment or soundbite that people are clipping and circulating. And he did not say Tariq Nasheed is CIA. He did not.
The U.S. State Department is still instructing and informing African people who are migrating legally to the country not to have anything to do with us. And so this bitterness has a lot of little things that go to. Our people don't want to be caught in that situation, but if the State Department is telling you that and you're trying to get your green card and a citizenship and a job or enter college, what are you going to do? Are you going to say, I'm not listening to y'all and be thrown back on a plane and sent back to Guinea? You're not going to do that.
Exactly. Okay, so let me pull that back, get back to this big screen. So y'all heard what was going on. Y'all heard, again, if you're not on YouTube, you probably didn't hear it, or you didn't hear it as well. In this clip, Dana is describing Professor Small's position, his lens, his the way he views things, the way he teaches things. And at least to some extent, Dana is in alignment with that. She's not critiquing that in a negative way. Now, Professor Small says Dana says because Professor Smalls is a Pan-Africanist, because he is a Pan-Africanist, she says he's going to always preach for unity with Africans throughout the diaspora. Now, I don't necessarily disagree with that. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. He's going to give you those facts. That's the thing. She admits that he's going to give you facts. One of the biggest complaints, one of the biggest issues with the FBA zeitgeist is they don't stand on facts. So she says Professor Smalls is always going to give you facts, which is very important, she says, because a lot of the dissension, a lot of the division, and she doesn't say this, I'm saying this, not only is it not based on facts, but she says it is government made. It is at the behest of the government. And she even says via public policies. Now, we may differ a little bit on whether or not it's via public policies. I can understand why some people might say it's via public policies. But I don't think it's only at the behest of public policy. But yes, if they can use a public policy, if they can use a piece of legislation in such a way as to try and cause division, yes, they will do it. And Tony Smith, I appreciate you being here. Good brother, my man. Appreciate you in the chat. It helps the algorithm. I would ask that you refrain from the expletives. If you, especially if you want your conversation to be heard, recognized, and dealt with, then you're gonna have to refrain from the expletives. Otherwise, you will just be ignored. Now, with that, so let me say, oh, I think I said that. So let me get back on track and not deal with the trolls. So I think it is worth noting that the base of her commentary there helps to serve as a good defense, helps to undercut what delineation actually is versus what they tell you it is. And because there's a difference between, delineation and separation when you're thinking about this from at least from a Pan-African or from the perspective of Professor Smalls, who is an educator, whose entire public pattern, whose entire public discourse is based on bridge building. And again, it's like, now the notion and the idea that bridge building is a bad thing. Yes, I'm gonna have a problem with that. That is a terrible notion. So it's now there are some people trying to say that if you are a Pan-Africanist or if you are in favor of or in alignment with Professor Smalls, then you're the one seeking division. And they could be further from the truth. So now what I will say is, now, if you are of that mind, if you categorically reject Dana's point, it's clear then that the dissension stems from you. She speaks of his desire to build bridges. Now, again, she says that some of this dissension comes from the government, and from much of this division comes from the government and from public policy. So I'll say, if that's the actual heart of the matter, I'm not mad at you for perceiving, for seeing and understanding and articulating and talking about the problems that come from public policy positions and different pieces of legislation. That's not what the problem is. Not that you're talking about it. What I would say is, if you are woke enough to understand that public policy is a battleground, then you should be woke enough to understand that the fight is with the policy. The fight is with the politicians, not the people who might receive something. And I'll say it this way: if you're on a sinking boat, fighting the passengers doesn't stop the water from taking over. So I hope you understand. I hope you get the point that I'm making there. Shout out to Isaiah Black. I'm not actually having a good day, but we are built for the problems. We are built for the drama. So I am getting along as smashingly as I possibly can. But I appreciate that statement, that sentiment. Peace to Beative for showing up. Thank you for appearing. Now, Tony Smith, thank you for correcting your expletive-filled language. I would ask Tony Smith to maybe make a couple of other statements. Why would you think that he should go to Africa? I was just building on this earlier today. Why would you think that a Pan-Africanist should go to Africa? That's the question that I have for Tony Smith and anyone on any of the platforms who think like that. Because Pan-Africanism has nothing to do with travel. But go ahead, explain yourself. Tony Smith says bridge building works for Africans, but not for us. Again, do you dare to show and prove that? You must. Well, I can't say that you're new to the channel. I would imagine you're new to the channel, but you may not. You may be familiar. You may be someone who's watched several times. I would dare say you have not watched the episodes where I show and prove that the bridge is live and well. You have not seen, or either that, or you just reject the facts. Now, I do know a lot of people in the delineation camp like to reject the facts, but the fact remains there are bridges being built every day, and those bridges are sustainable. Those bridges are assisting people on both sides of the Atlantic Ocean earn a living and create pipelines. So there are ecosystems being built and maintained between continental Africans, between African Americans, between Caribbean Africans, the whole nine. They are all being done, however, under the umbrella of Pan-Africanism. So if you're tuned out and you don't know anything, if all you know is the de facto leaders conversation, then you'll never know that there are Black people everywhere building bridges to help each other. Some are in America, some are on the continent of Africa, some are in the Caribbean. But continue with your empty talking points, and I will continue a conversation with you as well. So again, like I said, unless you categorically reject facts, then you will come to understand something ain't right with this delineation. Now I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna let Dana continue her conversation, because she says a few other things which are worth noting. Well, hold on, let's see. Mr. K says, LOL, how can FBA claim their culture is the most influential culture on the planet if they ain't building bridges? Make it make sense. That's a very good one. That's a very good one. And even if you look at that part of it, let me come back to the big screen for a hot second. Because even when you look at that, and again, as much as I disagree with the label, but this subgroup of African Americans love to claim that hip hop is the most dominant and prominent and influential music or culture or what have you. And so, like Mr. K says, then that proves you're building a bridge. And if you look into the entertainment world, you see continental Africans doing collabos, doing songs, doing music videos with African American artists. You even see Caribbean artists doing songs, doing collabos, doing music videos with continental Africans and African Americans. So just on a music tip, the bridge building has always been there. It's going to continue being there. And there are people who are being positively impacted. What I mean is literally those musicians, those artists, those entertainers are helping feed each other's ecosystems in a Pan-African manner, building bridges. The African American artist brings his fans to the table. The Caribbean artist brings his fans to the table. The continental African artist brings his fans to the table. And we all kumbaya together for at least 3 minutes and 45 seconds. And then another song, and then another song, and then another song. There's tours going on. So that's bridge building in a musical and cultural way. That's a new, thank you. I appreciate both Tony Smith's comment and Mr. K's comment, because I got to go back and add that to my notebook of Pan-African collaborations that happen all the time, no matter how much FBA says we got to delineate. me get back to Dana's clip. Let me get back to Dana's clip. So here we go. Or maybe I already played that. Let me see. Oh, no, let me just, right. She said that. I played that part. Not only were they, what did she say? Or what did he say? Not only were they telling the black immigrant. I believe I played that part. So let me pop back on up here. So yeah, in the clip that I played, it says not only were they telling the black immigrants that they were coming here, do not align with the black Americans. They were literally giving them money. Now, there's that public policy thing. They were literally giving them resources to give them an economic uplift. Now, this is what's said. And we've seen it in full-blown real time under the Biden administration, where they opened those borders. Now, that's a statement from Dana. That's a statement from Dana. And just to make sure I'm not speaking out of turn, let me see if I can get this.
A lot of you Negroes think vision is government made via public policies. Because not only were they telling the black immigrants that were coming here, don't fuck with the black Americans, they were literally giving them money, resources to give them an economic uplift. And we just seen it in full blown real time under the Biden administration when they opened up those borders.
Okay. So like I said, I ain't making it up. Now, I may have paraphrased a word or two from here or there because I ain't want to curse, but, it still came out in the video. But anyhow, so she's talking about this public policy. And so here's part of what I'm going to say. Because I'm not saying that she is absolutely dead wrong. I do think she's missing some of the nuance. There has been, and I would probably say there probably still is some documented controversy when it comes to migrants. Now, New York City in particular, I believe Chicago, I believe Denver, and maybe parts of California were sort of all in the news. Now, in New York, it was Mayor Eric Adams. Thank goodness he's no longer mayor. But he did literally put money onto EBT cards, debit cards, or styled cards. And that was specifically for the migrants who came through the southern border. But the thing about that, and I'm not saying it was good, I'm not saying it was bad, but let's understand what happened at that situation. Red states, the Republicans, were picking up the migrants. Here's the funny thing. The red states are so against the migrants coming across the border. They don't stop the migrants from coming across the border. They picked up the migrants and put them on planes. They picked up the migrants and put them on buses. They said, we're going to use our own red state money and we're going to ship you to the blue states and the blue cities. And so they transferred all of these people. So yeah, there was some money that did genuinely move. They transferred all of these people into New York, Denver, Chicago, so on and so forth. And the blue states, the cities, the mayors, the governors, they had a public crisis on their hands. A genuine public crisis. And so there's money in the budget. They pulled money from the budget to give to these migrants. Now, I'm not saying that they should have. I'm not saying that it's a good thing. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. This is what happened. So now, pretending otherwise would be dishonest on my own part. But let me be clear. Let me be very specific. It was city level emergency shelter and food money. It was money tied to southern border migrant crisis. What does that really mean? Understand me when I say this, because I fully recognize that it occurred. But what I'm saying is, it was the Republicans who created, who generated this border crisis. It was literally a crisis. It was designated a crisis. And why that's important. There is always money in the budget. Every year, every fiscal year, when they do the budget, they set aside loads of money. Now, I'm not saying that they should. I'm not saying that they shouldn't. I'm just telling you they do this. They set aside loads of money in the red states and the blue states. Even the federal government does it on the federal level for the just in case emergency. So if you wake up tomorrow and there's a flood, there's emergency money to help with the flood. If we wake up tomorrow and tornadoes sweep through a city, there's emergency money to help with the cleanup. That's emergency budget money. And the migrant crisis was an emergency budget expenditure. It was a crisis, just like the other examples I gave you. So the money is there in some capacity. The money is used in some capacity. I'm not spinning. But what I'm saying is, it was not a migrant targeted economic upliftment program. It was not a race targeted economic upliftment program. It was not specifically aimed at Black migrants or Black immigrants. It was not specifically designed. It wasn't even voted on. It wasn't even approached as, if we help, if we give attention, if we put money into this migrant crisis, we get to drive a wedge between the Black Americans and the other Black groups. That's fantasy. That's conflation in real time. So yes, real money did move, real controversy did erupt. Even public figures, whether you like them or not, spoke out about it. Even 50 Cent got involved, whether you like him or not. But the mechanism, what triggered the money, what triggered the cards and the hotels and all the other stuff, what triggered it was the Republicans generating a migrant crisis. And once they dropped all of those people off in those cities, what were they going to do? Spend more money? They were going to spend more money to put them back on the bus and send them back? That would be a little absurd. So what I'm saying is, the mechanism, the target that Dana describes, a deliberate government strategy to specifically uplift Black immigrants over the Black Americans, over African Americans. That's not what the documents show. That's not what the facts, that's not what history reveals. They were undifferentiated migrant assistance spending programs that happened to include some Black immigrants among many other nationalities. It wasn't a program built around race. It wasn't a program built around divide and conquer even. You could not make that argument unless you can show and prove that they do the same thing when the tornadoes hit, when the floods hit. But even granting all that, the actual point I'm trying to make, and this is the stronger point, blaming the group that receives the money doesn't fix the problem at all. It doesn't address the problem. So if you're going to be upset about the money going anywhere, then for one, you should be upset about the money going everywhere. You should be upset about the money going to Israel right now, the money going to Ukraine right now, not just the pennies going to some migrants that cross the border right now. But if you're going to be upset, why start with the smallest amount, with the smallest group, with the smallest number? Like I said, nobody in the FBA camp is furious about the millions and billions they send to Ukraine. But you all pearl clutched, bunched up pennies because a migrant got an EBT card for Winn-Dixie. The real reparations is the money going to states, not states, going to countries instead of the citizens. The real reparations money has been floated across the pipe to Ukraine and Israel. So if the actual grievance is policy, public policy and legislation, the target should be the policy and the people who pushed and promoted the policy, the people who signed those checks, not the smallest group to receive the pennies. So that's my take on that whole public policy thing. Now let me see what's going on in the chat. Let me see what's going on in the chat. Let's see, Shabaka, shout out to Shabaka for showing up. One love, peace, power, Pan-Africanism forever. Yes, indeed. Mr. K says, I would love for Dana to specify the stand fee the Black immigrants get. Oh, the standard fee that the Black immigrants get, and clarify the specific resources that the Black immigrants get. I would love it too. Now, I'm pretty sure she can't. I'm pretty sure she don't know it. If it does exist, I'm pretty sure she won't even look it up. But that's just me being a blind speculator on the matter. Mr. K says, it sounds like it was the refugee immigrants that were given the money and the so-called resources. It was indeed. It was the refugees. It was the people who came across the border and they were leaving their countries because their countries were in turmoil. And when people go back and look at it, they find out, oh, the country was in turmoil because of what the U.S. government did. The country was in turmoil because the U.S. put a blockade, because the U.S. put on sanctions, because the U.S. dropped the bomb. All of these people are fleeing tragedy. I can't stand on that. Almost all of these people, so many of these people, the great majority of these people are fleeing tragedies in their home that was caused more than likely directly, if not indirectly, by the U.S. government. You know, you break it, you fix it, you own it. Now, I don't know. Bronze guy is in the house. Shout out to you. I don't know what those words mean, and since they do seem a little bit on the on the low brow side, let me keep it moving. Shabaka says the FBA are trying to wedge hate among Blacks worldwide. Instead of talking, the FBA always crying and complaining. And this is something I definitely co-sign that. And it's something that even Dana is pretty much an avowed FBAer, and even she was calling them out for all of this crying instead of actually doing work. Shabaka says the FBA is a Black self-hating group of xenophobic Negroes. I like to call them Negropians, but you know, we on the right page. So let's see. Slick Nick 68 says Trump administration is doing all of the right stuff to create chaos, to create terror, to destroy the economy, to sow seeds of division amongst all groups of people. Yes, indeed, Slick Nick. The Trump administration is doing all the right stuff to harm the future balance and security of the world. FBA beasts. Again, with the stupidity, FBA beasts. Yeah, you don't have the brain power to even stand on your comment. Let's keep it going. So let's move into well, yeah, let's talk about this FBA. Their insistence on Pan-Africans leaving the country, their insistence on delineating. Let's see. Mr. K says it sounds like FBA co-op stories of the government support refugee immigrants to protect these stories for all immigrants. That's a good one. That's a good one. By trying to focus only on the Black ones, they're misconstruing, misdirecting, obfuscating what's really going on. I can see that a little bit. I can see that a little bit. So let me get to this next thing where Dana was saying. Let me add this back to the stage. And let me see if I can pull this up. This is coming up right about now. So here we go.
So this is nothing new.
This is not new.
So when Tariq Nasheed says here, FBA, we need to delineate, yes, you do. But I'm gonna get into that delineation. I'm gonna get into delineation because a lot of you Negroes think you are delineating when you're only delineating in your fucking mind and you ain't doing shit in real life. But I'll say that in a minute.
Okay. So there we go. You heard it straight from an FBA avowed person, an FBA aligned person. Although, let's keep it real. After she said that, they kicked her out. They said, we canceling her. She ain't no longer FBA because, it's a bloodline that's not a bloodline. It's a club. It's a group. It's a movement that's not a movement. And so when you piss people off, you get kicked out of your ethnicity. So anyhow, you heard her say when Tariq Nasheed says FBA needs to delineate, they do. But she closes with, but you ain't doing nothing in real life. Now that's the thesis statement for me. For her entire video, for quite a few of my own videos. And and I state that as a settled fact. FBA ain't doing nothing real, nothing legitimate, nothing towards getting the goal achieved. Now, as much as I push back on delineation as a concept, I will say at least, and because I had this little back and forth with a couple of FBA brothers, where they were telling me, well, you don't even understand what delineation means, and I said, okay, well, tell me, what is delineation? And then they said, go look it up. Okay. So at least with Dana, she's at least gesturing. She's at least pointing towards what might be considered a working definition. She says, if you're actually delineating, you should be doing real work on real issues that matter, not just repeating the word. And I'm like, again, that's at least a working definition. We need to delineate and do what? Tariq he ain't told me that part of the plan yet. Because that's all they got until Tariq unveils something else. They say delineation is we're going to take a stand. We're going to exercise our leverage in the next election. And what we going to do? We're going to sit on the couch. So thus far, delineation is couch potato syndrome. And since I'm talking about that, I'm going to go a little bit harder, family. Let me see what's going on in the chat before I move forward. So FBA Beezer says this is old. I said that at the beginning. This is an old clip. I said it came out around November of last year, I believe. So we are all aware of the age. Mr. K says, I wonder, has Dana delineated from her West Indian baby fathers? Woo, shots fired. I do not condone such. Shabaka says, there's a lot more issues and events to organize about. While FBA rides the couch, they cannot exist without Pan-Africanism. FBA delineates and runs away from yourself, uneducated, apolitical. Spot on, my brother. So let's see. Courtney says, just so you know, now I take issue with this. The Black community no longer trusts Pan-Africanists. Courtney, who voted you a spokesperson for the Black community? Now, if what you mean is the FBA community no longer trusts Pan-Africanists, we cool. I'm good with that. I understand that. We all know that. And we don't want to be part of your plan. You don't have a plan. You just have a word, plan. That's all you have. But go on, keep voting for the sofa. That's your plan. You either vote for the sofa or, like O'Shea Duke Jackson, you vote for Donald Trump 3 times. That's your plan. We don't need any more discussion of it, and we don't want to be a part of that plan. But let me get to, and this brings me right smack dab back to delineation and leverage. Because when you listen to them talk, it sounds so sophisticated. See, we got to use our leverage, family. It sounds so disciplined. It sounds like real strategy. But leverage only works when you're negotiating with two or more parties that can actually be negotiated with. When you're not sitting between two competitors, or when you're sitting between two competitors who actually want to consume you, to get your vote. That's not what is going on in the leverage argument. That's not what's going on in the leverage analysis. I dare say that's not what's going on in America, but I don't want to go that far. Let me give you an analogy. It's like standing in a cage, and in the cage, there's two lions on either side, and you're in the middle. Now, one lion on the right-hand side, let's keep this analogy in line. The lion on the right-hand side is starving, young, starving, and sharpening its teeth and staring in your direction. That's the Republican Party. And on the left-hand side is an old, toothless, mangy, weak lion whose hunting days are 10 years beyond its capacity. Now, the leverage theory says, let's have a seat, sit still. We're not going to feed either one of them. And eventually the hungry lion will have to come to terms with us. That's what leverage is in the delineation argument. And what I submit to you is there's no leverage in that cage. There's certainly, let me say it this way, there's no shot at leverage on the right-hand side of the cage. I'm not sure that you got a lot of leverage on the left-hand side, but you have zero leverage on the right-hand side. You are, quite frankly, you're pretty close to just a hostage, and you're playing with ideas of diplomacy. And I say that because leverage requires a credible threat that costs either side or both sides something that they're afraid to lose, something that they cannot otherwise get. So what exactly does the bloodthirsty lion lose if you sit and pray, if you sit still, if you take no actions whatsoever? You're just not gonna vote. That bloodthirsty lion doesn't lose much of anything, because he still can take a few steps and devour you. He wasn't hunting for your vote at all. He's just hunting. So withholding your vote from him isn't a threat. Doing nothing isn't a threat. It's irrelevant to him. The only thing doing nothing does, the only thing your non-vote does, is determine whether the toothless lion has enough left in him to even stand between you and the teeth. Now, you might be able to get yourself, you might be able to situate yourself on the other side of the old mangy toothless lion, and at best maybe use his body as carcass. But that takes, see, that's movement. That's not sitting still and doing nothing. That's maneuvering yourself over to the left-hand side, because that lion is less inclined to harm you. So the real question was never, how do I get leverage on the lion that wants to eat me? The real question is, do you get behind the only thing in that cage capable of absorbing a hit in your place, in your stead, instead of you? Because even an old, tired, half useless something is more valuable when you need defense. Or do you sit in the middle on your principles and find out the hard way what no leverage actually means when the hungry one decides it's dinner time? Now, again, hear me, understand me. That's not an open catch-all, unfettered endorsement of the Democratic Party. I'm just describing what a cage is, what America is. And loyalty is not a trap here. The fantasy that the predator is negotiable is the trap. So that's my take on delineation and the couch potato voting pledge. The couch potato voting plan that Courtney says, as a Pan-Africanist, I'm no longer allowed to be privy to. So Shabaka says they just playing with the business. Oh, this is a good question. The business says, so you think Kamala Harris was a good pick? Now, oh, my feelings are so hurt because he called me dumb. Define good. Do I think 500,000 African Americans would have been fired if Kamala Harris would have won? No. Do I think our supply chain, the oil and the gas prices would have skyrocketed because of the Strait of Hormuz if Kamala would have won? No. We could go on and on. This is not about who's the best person for the job. It's about who's not the devil for the job. I don't like Kamala Harris. I've never liked Kamala Harris. But I at least stand on facts. My dislike for her has nothing to do with what the FBA zeitgeist calls. Most of the stuff that the FBA zeitgeist pulls down as a criticism of Kamala Harris is a false narrative. It's fake. It's untrue. They just don't like it. They don't like her because she's a woman. That's not my beef with her. I would vote for her. If the only thing was different was if it was two women, I'd vote for her over a Republican woman. So again, being upset and trying to say Kamala Harris is not a good choice, you are the dummy in the conversation. So let me see. Fab 25 on this channel. Oh, this channel, this space is full of. Yeah, it sure is. So I'm going to keep moving. Shabaka says sitting on the couch is now their definition of black power. It's colonized power. Mr. K says it has to be said, FBA's claim for Africa to give them reparations is an extortion, racketeering front for black-faced minstrel U.S. imperialism. And it's more toothless than that old mangy tiger in my analogy because they have no legal grounds to get it. They have more legal grounds to get legitimate reparations from the United States government, and they would rather chase a phantom ghost of a legal case. And that shows you how serious they are about reparations. If you would rather chase somebody who you have no legal grounds to chase, instead of chasing the person who has all the legal grounds for recompense, and you have the nerve to call other people dumb. Let me see now. Robin Mutual. And again, Richard Burton. And who is Richard Burton? Like, so Robert Burton says Richard Burton argued that American slavery benefited. And it's not just Richard Burton. What's his name? Ron DeSantis in Florida argued the same thing. All of these white supremacists and many of the FBA people argue the same thing. They argue that American slavery was a benefit to the black population. They can argue it, that you call out racist white supremacist BS for what it is. It's not like, it's not a deep thought. It's not an intellectual thought. So yeah, when you run around mimicking and repeating this garbage ideology, then what Shabaka says is true. The FBA is a compromised group trying to cause confusion and division among blacks worldwide. According to the FBA, Trump is better. Again, so the FBA has no problem. As much as the FBA say this is all about getting our own house together, getting Black Americans together, what y'all got to say about the 500,000 African Americans that lost their jobs under the Trump administration? Nothing. You don't care, and you still think Trump is better. You cannot make the argument that the same thing would have happened under Kamala. Not at all. So again, that's the chat, people. Make sure you like, share, subscribe, hit those buttons, do all of the things. We're going to keep it moving. We're going to keep it moving. Let me see. I think I may have. No, I haven't covered that section yet. So let me put this back on the screen. So let's keep going with this. Here what Professor Smalls has to say.
Playing this clip here for when he arrives to the CIA COINTEL comment or soundbite that people are clipping and circulating, and he did not say Tariq Nasheed is CIA. He did not.
The U.S. State Department is still instructing and informing African people who are migrating legally to the country not to have anything to do with us. And so this bitterness has a lot of little things that go to. Our people don't want to be caught in that situation, but if the State Department is telling you that, and you're trying to get your green card and a citizenship and a job or into college, what are you going to do? Are you going to say, I'm not listening to y'all, and be thrown back on a plane and sent back to Guinea? You're not going to do that. Exactly. You're going to reluctantly go along with that process. And then that process starts building. And then you got the.
All right, so I'm going to pause there. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about that. And let me say shout out to Zach Akers. If you want to explain what you mean, then I'll consider your conversation. But I'm not going to respond to a blanket accusation that has no it has no basis in reality, but it has no explanatory example in it. So you heard Professor Smalls. The U.S. State Department is still instructing and informing African people who are migrating legally to the country not to have anything to do with us. He says there's a white paper that you can probably find. And I'm like, so again, if we're talking about if we're talking about public policy, if we're talking about government legislation, government agencies and activities, unless you're going to say, and maybe FBA says this, does FBA say we don't believe Professor Smalls when he says that the U.S. Department is instructing African people not to align with us? Because I mean, if that's your position, hey, again, just go back to your own little rock and live up underneath it. I take Professor Smalls at his word. I have heard this my entire life in the woke community, the conscious community. I have always heard African Americans making the argument. I've heard more African Americans making the argument than I have heard so-called immigrants. But I have heard immigrants say, yes, we were told, watch out. We were told, stay away. And so if you know this, if you know that the government does things to try to keep you separated, what you look like riding the separation train voluntarily. Now, I don't know what the white paper is. I know that there's some conversation about, and I'm not going to get this dude name right. It's one of those East European names, Zbigniew Brzezinski. And he wrote a book back in 1997 called the Grand Chessboard, or Zbigniewski's Grand Chessboard. And he laid out U.S. geostrategic frameworks, geostrategic frameworks. And he anchored his strategies in what you would consider divide and conquer ideology. And he was a national security advisor. Some documents, some people say that there was a memorandum that he authored. I think they call it Memorandum 46. Some say that it specifically said in the 70s and 80s that Black Africa and the US Black movement need to stay divided. Now, I don't know if it's real. I don't know if it's true. There's been conversation. There are some people who make the argument that it's fake. There's some people who make the argument that it's real. But this is what he's talking about. That this divide is originally sourced as a plan, as a method from the US government. The same US government that FBA says, "Oh, we love you." Matter of fact, there were two African American radio hosts on an XM channel, I believe, that they did a piece on Memorandum 46. They got fired. They got fired after that. So let me see what else is going on now. I'm not gonna. Let me see. So let me see. Zach Akers, I'll humor you. You said with a straight face, FBA don't care about Ukraine. Hold on, wait a minute. Where did the comment go? Let me put that on the screen. So you said with a straight face, FBA don't care about Ukraine getting US tax dollars. That could be used for reparations. You know you lying. Okay, I ain't gonna repeat the ad hominem attacks. I do not know I'm lying. I have not. I tell you what. You send me a video clip of an FBA decrying the money that goes to the Ukraine, and I will say, I was wrong. We found the needle in the haystack. There's an FBA that cares. I ain't heard an FBA talk about the money that goes to Ukraine. I've heard FBA talk about migrants, immigrants. I've heard FBA talk about Africans. I've heard FBA talk about Jamaicans and Caribbeans. I ain't heard an FBA talk about the money that goes to Ukraine. Not an FBA person who identifies as FBA. Don't send me no mess where there's an African American representative who voted against it, or there's an African American talking about it. Hell, I talk about it. I'm an African American, and I care about the money that they send to Ukraine instead of giving it to us as reparations. But I ain't FBA. I'm an African American. So humor me, please. Now, Be Active says, what is the legal definition of the term and descriptor of Black American in the Americas? Well, Black America means one, a person of African descent born in the USA. Also, Black American is two, a person African descent born anywhere in the Americas, because America is a continent, not a country. And Be Active says, so if 99.9% of FBA classify themselves as not being African descendants, which should mean that the real African American or Afro diasporan businesses are not FBA businesses in no shape or form. Exactly. Let's see what's going on in the chat. Diver says FBA is fulfillment by Amazon. They copying that with some fake ish. Yep. Let's see. Beat Active says Black American reparations is meant for African descendants of the Atlantic slave trade, the same ones who suffered slavery in the Jim Crow era. And as a matter of fact, if you were to take the time to look at least HR 40, now and I keep forgetting the other bill. There are two bills. There's at least two bills. There may be a third one, but there are at least two bills on the federal level designed for reparations. Are they the best ever written? No, but they are the bills that are in the pipeline. Both of those bills specifically identify African Americans, for the purposes of reparations, are the ones who descend from the southern plantation of American slavery. So by in writing, the so-called delineation is already done. Just like when they do a bill when they wrote legislation to protect handicapped people, they didn't write it so that every human being in America with a handicap is protected. No, they created in the bill specific definitions. This is how you get covered. If this is not one of the things you have, sorry, Charlie. That's how legislation works. You don't need a social movement to reclassify a whole ethnicity. That's why you've never had one in order to get reparations. DVS says there is no FBA. That's some made up goofy-ish. Well, I can't say that there isn't one. It is definitely made up. It is definitely goofy. But you can even see in the chat that there's some bots or some real humans who do actually think they are doing something. Mr. K says, when has FBA denounced the U.S. tax dollars funding all these illegal wars and strike attacks across the global South? Yeah, please. We're going to wait for Zach Akers. We're going to wait for him to give us some proof. But we know he ain't really got none. Let's see. Shabaka says, to Zach Akers, FBA are unfunny jokes. What are you and the FBA doing? Nothing but lying on the couch. Tony Smith, why don't you call Jamaicans African Jamaicans? Some Jamaicans do actually call themselves African Jamaicans, but that's their personal choice. Now, I will tell you this. Let me say it this way. Jamaicans go by their nationality. They don't have to call themselves African or Africanized or Afro if they don't want to, because they are the African melanated people in Jamaica are the majority. I hope that makes sense to you. But Jamaicans do recognize, even if they don't use the name, they still recognize their African descent. So again, nobody is saying you have to call yourself African American. There's been this, again, with these straw mans and red herrings and fake false narratives. For as long as the term African American has been out, or not out, as long as the term African American has been in use since the 80s, falsely attributed to Jesse Jackson, the term Black American has been out and in use. And so why am I saying that? Jamaicans identify themselves by their nationality. So if you're going to use Jamaicans as an example, then why aren't you just calling yourselves Americans? Because your nationality is American. So Jamaicans go by their nationality. Yours is American. So you need to drop foundational, you need to drop Black, and you need to drop African. If you're trying to make the argument that everybody else goes by their nationality, so then go by yours and just call yourself an American. And then you either get or you don't get whatever you're supposed to get as an American. God is gracious says, what about the descendants of slaves owned by freedmen? To my knowledge, the best of my recollection, they're African Americans. Now, if I misspoke when I gave my example of a definition, when I gave my example of what's in the legislation, then that misspeaking is on me. But the legislation is written to consider all of the people. And I don't even think I misspoke, because I said that reparations in HR 40 is for the African American who is a descendant of the Southern plantation era, which is known as slavery. Whether you were owned by white folk or freedmen, you're still counted. So Mr. K says, Tariq always says, hold your own I ain't gonna say that. Regarding U.S. imperialism, wars, and strike attacks in countries across the global south. Exactly. I see what you're saying. So again, okay, maybe Zach Akers got something. Here he go. I caught you boy being dishonest, and now you mad. Okay. Oh no, not Pan Mulattoism. I thought you changed your name. I thought my cousin said you changed your name to something else. Pan Mulatto says, respectfully, you're wrong. HR 40 doesn't delineate nor articulate that the target demographic of reparations is specifically descendant of U.S. chattel slaves. Show me. Show me your version of HR 40. Show me your version of HR 40. Because I read it. And I've even shown it on this channel before. Now, we may have a difference of opinion on what the words mean. Shabaka says the FBA was already here. The FBA is trash. Let's see. Tony Smith. Again, Tony Smith says we're Americans. Like I said, if your beef with African Americans calling themselves African Americans, and if your beef is Jamaicans don't do the hyphen, you don't have to do the hyphen. You perfectly within your rights to call yourself just an American. Now, us African Americans over here, we're gonna still call ourselves African Americans, just like the FBA cult is still gonna call themselves FBA, even though their arguments. Here's the thing: it's not an argument about what you should be called or what we should be called. What I'm arguing, what I'm debating, what I'm discussing is the logic behind your claim. If your claim is we shouldn't have to use African American because Jamaicans don't use the African, I hear you 100%. You shouldn't have to use African as a hyphenate onto your American nationality because Jamaicans don't hyphenate theirs either. So you should just be an American. You have every right to do that. You just don't have the logical position to go further than that. Because foundational and black attached to American is essentially the same hyphenated, if you want to call it nonsense. So Q, okay, I can't get your whole name out. I'm sorry about that. Q's ear should word it compensation for the descendants of people enslaved by the United States of America. That's interesting. Like I said, maybe, you know what? I might do this. I may, for next week, I may go back and pull up all my old research and pull up the HR 40 legislation so we can put it back on the screen. Pam Mulatto says, you're wrong about Jamaicans, bro. There are Indians and Chinese Jamaicans, not just Jamaicans of African descent. I didn't say, let me calm down. My brother, Pam Mulatto, I did not say that every Jamaican is of African descent. I fully know, I'm fully aware that there are Indians and Chinese. I know this. I could actually make the argument that when you get into a detailed conversation in Jamaica with the various groups, that might be the time when a Black Jamaican might say, I'm African Jamaican. And the Chinese might say, I'm Chinese Jamaican. And the Indian might say, I'm Indian Jamaican. Because they're in their group, they're in their country having a conversation amongst themselves. They may not. I'm not saying that they do. I'm saying I fully am aware that Jamaica is not 100% Black. And I never said that it was. So no offense, but please listen to what I'm saying. Let's see. So L Aubrey, Trump is that something, something, something. I can't even repeat all that. Shabaka says Jamaica is the voice and sound system of Pan-African unity. Rasta uniting the African world. Yeah, man. Tony Smith, but all of humanity comes from Africa. Yeah, this is true. And it means what? It means nothing. Because most of not most, all of humanity came from Africa. And several branches on the African human tree morphed and shifted, and DNA changed, and climate changed, and all this other stuff. So King Shaw says, we're Black American. See, here's one of the funny things. I can see why some people start to say there's like this narcissism thing growing inside the FBA movement. Because the FBA here's the difference between a Pan-Africanist and an FBA. Here's one difference. FBA keeps inserting themselves as the voice of the entire ethnicity. FBA says, we're all blank. Pan-Africanists say, I'm a Pan-Africanist. I'm not forcing you to agree with me. I'm not forcing you to align with me. I'm not forcing you to utilize my terminology. I'm an African American. I don't force you to use the hyphen. I don't force you to use any of the configurations of the words. That's because at least on this level and in this topic, I don't have the narcissistic trait. I don't feel the need to force the whole group, to force my label, to force my idea of identity onto every last one of us. But FBA can't even help themselves. Everywhere they go, we're FBA, we're not Black, we're not African, we're not African American. Y'all need some counseling. Y'all really do need some counseling. You cannot rename the entire ethnicity, at least not without a vote. And that's the interesting thing. And I brought this up the other day, and I'm gonna keep on bringing it up every time I hear this idiotic position. When the term African American was approved, it was done so at a convention. 75 Black organizations, 75 organizations of African American heritage came together. They had an actual live event where everybody, just like people buy tickets and book hotels and go to Essence Fest, people went to the convention. Historians and scholars and politicians and everybody showed up to have the conversation. What's the best name for us to use? They all came out of that having taken a vote. We're going to call ourselves African American. That's more official than one online group saying, no, we all got down to this new label. No, we do not. If you really want everybody in the Black community to accept your label, hold a convention. Let all of the scholars show up, not just Tariq Nasheed and his sycophants. Hold the convention. Let's duke it out live and see what comes of it. Pam Mulatto says, again, oh my God, Pam Mulatto, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna do that show for you, Pam Mulatto. There's this, I don't know what this is. And see, I don't know if Pam Mulatto is being honest. Maybe he just doesn't understand the way I talk. I never said, and I'm quoting HR 40. I didn't say I'm speaking verbatim from the HR 40 legislation. So Pam Mulatto says HR 40 doesn't mention Southern plantations. I didn't say that. It says descendants of enslaved Africans, which isn't specific to U.S. freedmen. Okay, well, you're gonna have to teach me that one. I'm not debating you on the quote that you gave. I'm debating you on what I said and implied. But let's go with this. So if it says descendants of enslaved Africans, and you say that is not specific to U.S. freedmen, what does that mean? Tell me that. Teach me something. B Act says, first of all, FBA is not a legal recognized ethnic, racial, cultural, or national term or descriptor. The copyright term FBA is only recognized as a trademark brand of products owned by Tariq Nasheed. Let me see. Drew said, I'm European American, and I recognize you as such. Tony says we've never been to Africa. When did that become the litmus test of what your DNA says? Now, is Tony the same person? If y'all in the chat, help me out. Is Tony the same person that said we all come from Africa? I'm not sure. If Tony is the person that said everybody on the planet comes from Africa, and then he says, but I've never been to Africa. Again, your travel plans has nothing to do with your DNA. Now, again, Zach says, how many blacks are obtuse enough to deny Africa? The very ones in this chat. Zach, you are the obtuse one, because you know, I don't know what you're viewing this on, but clearly you're not paying attention. There's multiple people in the chat room saying, we not African. So they are denying Africa. Now, I don't mind you calling me a hater. I am a hater. It's a whole lot. I got a long list of hates. I am enthusiastically a hater. I hate falsehood. I hate false narratives. I hate liars. I hate crooks. I hate cults. Y'all see where I'm going? Let's see what else is going on. Let's see. So, okay, I can't get to all of that. Woo, I was really falling behind. Beat Active says Richard Benjamin Moore, Barbados-born Afro-Caribbean civil rights activist, writer, and prominent socialist in 1919. He was also one of the earliest advocates of the term African American. I just showed the other day, like, again, African American as a term goes back to 1878. So, again, so far before Jesse Jackson, so far before the convention that was held. But let's move on. I want to get so bogged down that I miss some of the more important parts of this video that we're talking about. Let me see if I can get to this next section. Let me see. All right, yep, this is what's coming up next. So here we go.
African Americans just play in ignorance, but we don't know how much American State Department or Justice Department is involved in Foundation of Black America. Who's getting paid the money to say what they're saying? There's a paper, it's a white paper, you could probably find it online. It was done by a man named Brzezinski.
So he just said, you don't know how much the government is in the Foundation of Black Americans. Who's getting paid the money to say what they're saying? Is he talking about Tariq Nasheed? Did he say Tariq Nasheed? Do you think Professor Small is scared to say Tariq Nasheed is probably getting money from the government and that he got to subliminally take shots at him? I don't think so.
Now I'll co-sign that. If Professor Smalls wanted to say that Tariq Nasheed is it, he would have said it. He says what he means, and he means what he says. So I agree with Dana with the data. I agree with her. And I agree with Professor Smalls. We don't know how much involvement there is in the FBA universe from the government. Now, I will say this, historically speaking, we have always, as a group of people, as African Americans, we have always used this metric, so to speak, as the litmus test. I'll say two things. If it walks like a duck, if it quacks like a duck, we pretty much gonna call it a duck. And we've always said that things that come from the enemy, however you define the enemy, usually we define it as some arm, some leg of the government. Some people say U.S. imperialism. Some people say Uncle Sam. Some people just say the government or the U.S. government. But those things, just like the COINTELPRO program, I shouldn't even say it that way. Just like COINTELPRO. Before COINTELPRO was exposed to be real, we as African Americans said, there's something at the heart of all this confusion. There's something at the heart of division that helps lead us to getting conquered. And so we said that before we had any proof of COINTELPRO. Then we found the proof of COINTELPRO. The government admitted that they were doing it, but then the government said, but we promise we're not going to do it no more. Now, some of us believe the government when the government says we promise we're not going to do it anymore. And some of us say, if it walks like a duck, if it quacks like a duck, then it's a duck. So again, that's the playbook. When things start sowing division in the community, we're supposed to look and see, well, why now? Why division? Because it doesn't even take a lot to unify. It doesn't even take a lot to stand in solidarity. Nobody in the Pan-African movement asks you to give up something about your American rights in order to show and prove that you are Pan-Africanist. But FBA wants you to give up all types of things in order to pledge your allegiance. So that line in the sand itself seems to cause some confusion, seems to generate some confusion. So like I said, there's a playbook. And in the playbook of confusion, we see Uncle Sam at the heart of it. We see COINTELPRO. We see the government. That's what they've always done. Now, I know every time I bring this up, brothers tell me, you can't say that. You can't say that we are COINTELPRO. You can't say that we are CIA, PSYOP. You can't say that. That's wrong. So what I started saying was, well, if it walks like a duck, and if it quacks like a duck, some people say, history repeats itself. And then a few people said, I guess I'm tired of that phrase. They said, well, it may not necessarily repeat itself, but history rhymes. So history rhymes. COINTELPRO don't have to repeat itself. It can rhyme. So the historical parallel is still sound. Now, let me see what's going on. Beat Active says, Richard B. Moore, a civil rights advocate who led the fight for the Scottsboro Boys and pioneered the use of the term Afro-American. So there's a Barbados brother, and he did what? He led the fight for the Scottsboro Boys. Now, if you don't know who the Scottsboro Boys are, get offline and go get a history book. But that's a group of African Americans who were getting railroaded by FBA's beloved uncle. So let me see what else we got going on in the chat. Hey, right, exactly. If it walks like one and it talks like one, Shabaka says it's a damn duck. James Weldon Johnson has Bahamian parents. 1871, NAACP leader and Harlem Renaissance figure. We have been in alignment. We have been coalescing. We have been doing that Pan-African thing since the 1800s. And I will say this, throughout the entire time we have been here, throughout the entire time we have had Pan-Africanism working in our communities, in our neighborhoods, there has always been a small group of haters trying to kill it. They haven't killed it in 400 years. They are no more successful than Uncle Sam is in trying to eliminate us all. Now, they can create confusion. They can create conflict. But Black Power always wins in the end. I'll say that. And I ain't trying to sound like no preacher. I'm just saying. So like I said, the historical parallel is sound. One of the best things about this diaspora war is that the FBA is too disorganized to really have a solid impact. And this is by their own bragging rights. They don't want to be organized. When I say they are an organization, it'll correct you. No, hold up, my brother. We're not an organization. That's not what we are. That's why you're not working on legislation. Like what Dana said. That's why your delineation is thin air, because you're not organized. You don't have a political platform of any caliber, of any consistency. That's why you showed up at a book signing to demand reparations. Now, if chasing ambulances was ever a thing, showing up to a former politician, an ex-politician's book signing to demand reparations from the US government, if that ain't the height of insanity. But you won't show up to Congress. You won't show up to the Senate. You won't show up to the White House. But you'll go to Books a Million and say, we want our reparations and we're not going to vote. To a lady that ain't running at all. Yeah, delineation in all of its delirium. And so that brings me to this next point, if I can get to it. And I even think Dana is maybe partially. Dana may partially be in agreement with what I'm going to say. Let's see. Let's see where this is. So let's get up to this extra minute. And get ready to push play.
You're separating yourself for the purpose of what? To do what? So maybe you have to delineate in your mind first, because you were just so ignorant to groups of people here in this country.
So,
and so
listen to what she say.
Of today in 2025, niggas are easily to infiltrate on whatever level. Because again, FBA is not an organization. It's not a political group.
Mic check.
You ain't lobbying for a politician. You have no money behind you. You're not collecting money. You're not a 501c. So there's nothing that you can really disrupt, but you could cause chaos.
Mic check.
And dissension and division. So all delineation. Okay, what is delineation? You're separating yourself for the purpose of what? To do what? So maybe you have to delineate in your mind first, because you were just so ignorant to the fact. But then what are you doing in your community where you live at? Do you own your own home? No. You pay rent to a Jew. And I'm talking about the Jews that got the curls. The ones that we used to always call the slumlords. You get up in the morning and you clock in to a company, a corporation owned by a white man with a board. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's nothing wrong with being a worker. Having an honest job, getting an honest pay, taking care of your family.
And we're going to put a pause on that right there. See, y'all heard what the sister said. If you're over here on TikTok, please, if you're still here, let me know if you can hear me now. I got the mic readjusted or whatnot. But so in this clip, you hear her really clamping down on this delineation movement. And let me see what else is going on in the chat. Like I said, I'm not Shabaka, that's what's up. I'm not gonna read off the trolls, family. But I love for the trolls to still be here. So you hear her talking about delineation. And so I would say one of the things that I wanted to, I guess, give her credit for. I'm only giving her credit for this one segment of the video, because I know she went right back into FBA ideologies very hard after this. But this is the strongest substantive part of the video, or at least in reference to argument about policy. The coalition building point, because that's what I'm talking about. I don't care that you want to delineate. If you have a full-throated political objective. Now, like the other sister said, we're not going to let you Pan-Africans in on the plan. Okay, and you're not going to get reparations. Like, if the plan is, so you want to delineate, and you say that you delineate in order to obtain reparations. You have, so after you delineate, which is nothing but a few words in the legislation and nothing else, then what? How does delineation get you to reparations? You still have to work with other groups. So let's say, even if I was in favor of delineating, but I want reparations as legislation to get approved. Well, there are African Americans in Congress that need to vote for it. There are Jewish Americans in Congress that need to vote for it. There are Jamaican Americans in Congress that need to vote for it. There are Catholic Americans, if that's a thing. There are any host of other European descended white Americans in Congress. They all have to vote for it. How does delineation get us all the other votes? And with which party will it get us? And I say that because even if you look historically speaking, Lyndon B. Johnson, he had to work with people he didn't necessarily want to work with. He had to work with people who were delineated from his own political agendas. He needed Everett Dirksen, Everett Dirksen, a conservative Republican Senate leader. He had to work with this man, although they did not agree on much of anything, to break the Southern Democrat filibuster in order to get the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the 1965 Voting Rights Act passed. That's a genuine, politically uncomfortable, polarized, crossed ideological alliance. They had to work across the aisle to deliver that actual legislative win. That's not a hypothetical. That's real. Two entirely separate camps still had to figure out how to work together to achieve a political goal, objective, agenda. But FBA says we don't need that. We just need to delineate, and then the reparations check will appear. It's like manifest thinking. It's like that positive meditation. If you think it, it will appear. And Tony Smith with his hateful rhetoric. I would like to challenge Tony Smith's statement, but it is written in such piss poor pejorative terms that I can't. I'm not gonna. But again, with all of the different racial, cultural, ethnic groups in America as a whole population, in the Congress and in the Senate, if you think that by delineation, you're going to remove all of the racial, ethnic, religious, delineated groups from you, again, even if that's your goal, one thing I'll give Project 2025, the Heritage Foundation, at least they wrote their agenda down and they diligently worked to obtain it, to achieve it. So even if you want to remove all of the politicians that you think are against you, okay, let me see you do it. Let me see you replace one politician. If you, as FBA, can delineate and replace one politician, then you have a test case to show and prove that it can be done. But you ain't done that yet. Now, y'all been delineating for 10 years. and you still have not even one politician. The Tea Party didn't take that long. The Birther Party didn't take that long. They delineated, and they put people in office the same year they delineated. They didn't wait for the rest of white America to delineate with them. They said, we're going to take our few and we're going to show and prove. Y'all ain't did that. All y'all do is talk delineation. And Shabaka, yeah, Shabaka's calling out Zach Akers. What half-truths? The FBA is an embarrassment to real blacks worldwide. The FBA is an unfunny, Tariq Nasheed, xenophobic joke. I'd say cult, but Shabaka said joke. So Tony Smith says we won't vote for them. Okay, but again, not voting is not a strategy. Sitting on the sofa doesn't work. So now, if you mean we're going to vote for somebody else, that's fine. Tell me who you're going to vote for, because you ain't running no candidates. Because remember, FBA is not a movement. It's not an organization. So who are the FBA candidates that you're going to vote for instead of the Democrats or the so-called immigrant blacks that you don't want to see in office? You still don't have anybody to vote for. You just gonna vote for another racist Republican, the same ones who went into Illinois and said, yeah, we're gonna block that reparations program they got going on in there. That's who you're gonna vote for. Way to go, delineation. So like I said, even LBJ had to work with people who were his political rivals. He didn't say, I got to get this man out of office. He said, this man is in office. We got to get this work done, so we're going to have to work with him. Because you're not going to get everybody out of office in one cycle. You're not even going to get anybody out of office this one year. And that's if we get the vote. Because with the Epstein administration, ain't no telling what's going to happen. So again, and I know I'm gonna say this, and I know y'all hate this, the Congressional Black Caucus itself was founded in 1971. It secured its first real meetings and policy concessions partly through negotiated relationships, even with the Nixon administration. And the Nixon administration ain't had no affection for none of them. But they even forced a former White House meeting after Nixon initially and officially refused one. Nixon said, I ain't gonna meet with them Negroes. And they forced him to meet. And so again, part of what Professor Smalls was saying is, if you want to achieve an agenda, then you're gonna have to shake the hand of the devil. You're gonna have to work with him. And so every day that you spend trying to delineate from a Black immigrant group is a day you didn't spend securing the reparations legislation. So how badly do you want it? You would rather divide the Black community than work on pressuring every politician to vote to get the reparations legislation onto the floor for a full public vote. I used to get upset with the dummies who say the Congressional Black Caucus has been taken over by immigrants. And I said, you know something, let me look it up. And I'm like, the overwhelming majority of the Congressional Black Caucus is still African American. So again, you sound like you are mimicking white supremacists who say our country's being taken over when they still run and control everything. Now, I will say this to Qzir. Qzir says, I don't think of FBA as a joke. I take it as a serious threat to our future well-being. Once completely isolated, then who will aid and assist us in survival? I agree with that 100%. Now, again, Shabaka calls them a joke, and they are, in effect, a joke, but it is not a joking matter. I call them a cult, but it's not a joking matter. They are a serious threat. They want to achieve isolation. And isolationism has never helped anyone. Isolationism never helped African Americans. Isolationism didn't even work for America as a country. America as a nation had to step away from all of its isolationist policies in order to keep its own economic head above water. And so again, Tony Smith is just spewing dumb stuff because it's the Pan-Africanists who have been pushing for reparations. It's the FBA people who have been trying to block reparations. No, we don't want it if we got to share it. But let me see if I can get on to this what was the next section of Dana's clip? Let me see. Where did that go? Push that on up a little bit. Okay, so here we go. Let me add this and see what's going on.
Align yourself with your enemies. You're going to need allies. We have a president in the White House today surrounded by nothing but enemies here and abroad. But he still sit down with them. He still have a conversation. He still got to come up and broker deals. You got to work with your enemy. If you want to get anything in this country, you're going to have to shake the hand of the devil. So you could delineate all the fuck you want. But if you ain't actually taking action via public policies on a local level, then sit your ass all the way the fuck down. You ain't serious. It's just internet talk.
Exactly. Now, again, you're not serious. It's not a serious thing. It's just internet talk. And so again, in that section, I fully agree with Dana's analysis and criticism. Because again, the entire FBA universe came together for the sake of reparations, and they have done nothing to achieve reparations. They have done nothing. And when you box them into a corner, that's when they tell you, well, it's not just about reparations, it's about delineation. They only came up with the term delineation so that they could not talk about reparations, so they'd have something else to talk about, because it was clear that they're not doing anything for reparations. So when she said you ain't doing nothing, she's telling the truth. And she points out, just like I pointed out, if you have a political agenda, you're not going to achieve it by boxing yourself in, by isolating yourself. And even she brings up Trump. And she says he still works with people that he considers enemies. And that's a fair point. No politician can box themselves off if they want to get something done, unless they're moving from being a politician to a dictator. And I'm like, look, I can't stand the man. I don't like Epstein. I don't like the Epstein administration at all. But her underlying argument holds regardless of who the example is and regardless of how you feel about this administration. You have to do more than talk. You have to do more than yell. You have to do more than point fingers. And all of the pro FBA people in this chat room is doing nothing but yelling and pointing fingers and using ad hominems and twisting words and spewing forth nonsense. But you have to be able to sit down with whoever you consider your enemy and whoever you consider your friend. You can't take your friends for advantage. You have to sit down with them and work on things in collaboration. Now, I will say this. I disagree. I'm not co-signing Dana's framing, because it seems like she's framing the quote unquote immigrant groups as enemies. I'm not saying she is. If she's not, cool. If she is, I disagree with that. But even if that's your genuine belief, like, I'm not going to talk till I'm blue in the face to make you see the truth that other black groups are not your enemy. What I'm going to say is, even if you think they are your enemy, you still have to find a way to work with them. The same way you seem to have no problem working with racist white supremacists. If you can work with a racist white supremacist, then you can work with another black person who don't share the slave plantation heritage of America. And here's the thing, the African American organizers in the civil rights era, before the civil rights era, and ever since the civil rights era, they knew who the enemy was. They knew white supremacy was the enemy, and they still worked with them. They still found specific white allies to unite with and work together for a shared bigger goal. So if you want reparations, that's what you have to do. Sitting on the sofa ain't it, which means delineation ain't it. Collaboration is the only thing that's ever gotten any group of people anything. So Mr. K says all the FBA is give their so-called enemies the riot act on social media, not the disciplinary act in real life. I'm almost glad that I would hate to see the FBA's zeitgeist in the streets for real, because they clearly are xenophobic. They clearly are overly aggressive and hyper vigilant. So if they do take to the streets, there's going to be some problems. And the funniest thing is, if they were to take all of that aggressive, hyper vigilant, xenophobic energy into the streets, they'd be the ones getting arrested. Now, Shabaka says support the AES. Yes, indeed. Pan-African unity and African solidarity worldwide. African people must unite worldwide. And so again, here's the thing. I can say that clean of conscience. That statement has nothing to do with whether or not I'm fighting for my reparations. That statement has nothing to do with whether or not I'm fighting for the right politician to win the seat in my home state. You can be Pan-African and you can be hyper vigilant on the political strivings of your own state, your own city, your own community. Has nothing there. So again, what I'm saying is xenophobia has no place because it has no purpose other than divide and conquer. It doesn't achieve anything but divide and conquer. And that goes for whatever word you FBA is synonymous with xenophobia. Delineation is synonymous with xenophobia. Unless or until you get to the point where there is a political movement, like one brother said, well, we just gonna get them out of office. When you gonna start? Because you've been delineating for 10 years. Now, once you remove one, I'll believe you. I'll believe that you have some type of political backbone. Mr. K says, if the FBA was to go to the streets, it would be a stain of Black America, so much that it would be used as pretext to criminalize Black Americans even more. Yeah, this is true. This is absolutely true. Renee is love, again, with one of the stupid talking points. African people are not even coming together worldwide. You can't show and prove that. You must be living underneath a rock. I think Shabaka's been one who's been pretty vigilant in reminding us that the AES exists. The Alliance of Sahelian States is on a wide scale, worldwide recognized level. 3 African nations decided we don't need these borders as much as we think we do. And they have created mechanisms of Pan-African unity and solidarity. And that's just one. That's one group of Africans coming together on the world stage. But Renee's love says, well, I guess I got my blinders on. Renee's love is like, I don't see it. And that's just one. CARICOM is another example. There are universities in the Caribbean where all of the Caribbean nations work together to maintain and sustain one university. It has multiple campuses across the different nations. That's Pan-Africanism. And again, man, I have gone so many countless times over the African Americans that opened up a credit union with Africans and Caribbean people in the South. The Ghanaian American that rescued an African American owned bank in Chicago. The African American who opened up a clothing business and secured contracts with the Nigerian government. Pan-Africanism is everywhere. Pan-Africanism is everywhere, and Africans are coming together all over the place. So let me see if I can jump up to this next clip. Where is the next clip? It's coming, it's coming, it's coming. Okay, so add this to the stage. Let's see what else is going on.
He is not going to sit up here and be your leader and take you to the so-called promised land. You got to be your own leader. He's not going to sit down and write up public policies and say, this is what we need. He ain't doing all that because he's not about to sit up here and sacrifice his livelihood for niggas. Ignorant at that. I'm not talking about, there are a lot of Black Americans that are actually doing stuff. But it's not enough to say that you want to delineate where you going and what are you doing. Delineation is an action where you have to actually see a result. So what are the results of you delineating? Have you gone to your local congressperson that you elected to go to Congress? Have you went to your local state congressperson in the House and the Senate to pressure them, to pressure the Congressional Black Caucus to have another committee hearing on reparations? No, you have not. No, you have not. You haven't even done it on a state level. There are people.
So again, like I said, family, I will continue to say this, but I got to make sure that I say it about this video and this video only. I am thoroughly impressed with Dana's commentary, her criticism, and her analysis of the FBA movement at this juncture. I ain't silly. I know she went right back hardcore pro FBA after this, but this is a very effective call out. The funny thing to me is, after such an effective call out, FBA disowned her, but that's neither here nor there. The key, like I said, the key thing here is, if you want to delineate, if you want to be FBA, have at it. Show us some results. If you want Pan-Africanism, you keep saying Pan-Africanism, y'all got it wrong. Show us. Prove to us we got it wrong. Like, where is, like I just gave a very brief 10-15 second rundown of different Pan-African businesses, different Pan-African governments doing things to achieve real progress in the real world, material, substantive things. What has FBA done? What has FBA done? When you do a full analysis, you see that the FBA is as a label, as a movement, as an identity, is a hollow nothing burger. And the fallback is always, once you push them on reparations, this is about delineation. Once you push them on delineation, like she did, well, you haven't done any programs, you haven't done any policies, you're not even fighting and pushing for any politicians. Because, and then people will, critics will say, you're not doing any of this because Tariq hasn't told you to do any of this. And they'll say, well, Tariq is not our leader. Well, you need one. Like she said, if you're going to delineate, then you have to take steps. There has to be actions. It's a verb for a reason. But you never do anything that the verb actually requires. Every citizen has the right to criticize their own government on federal level, local level. But no citizen anywhere gets a chance or gets to change the treatment from their government. just by saying a particular word loudly. Does that make sense? You all have a right to criticize the government, but you don't get any change from your government just by speaking loudly, just by repeating a word like it's a mantra. If all you're doing is exercising free speech with no plan behind it, okay. If it's a good speech, it's a good speech. If it's a bad speech, it shows improves itself. But either way, it doesn't get anyone anything in the real world beyond maybe a decent YouTube check. Because anger sells, because hate sells, because division sells. Just like they said back in the day, they said sex sells. Well, now anger and hate sell just as much, if not more, than sex. So again, what are the goals? What are the goals of FBA? What are the goals of delineation? Like I said, it's African Americans in Evanston, Illinois. It's not FBA. African Americans largely aligned with the Democratic Party got a reparations program up off the ground, running, and ready to distribute cash. And FBA said, no, we don't even believe in that. And Donald Trump said, we're going to stop it. We're going to make sure not one penny goes out to any of them Negroes. So that's your delineation that you didn't even work on, that you don't even support, but you say you support it. It's African Americans in California that were working on reparations, and they were doing it mostly with Democrats. Now, and even the Democrats, like they do, they fumbled the ball, but the Republicans blocked the ball. It's African Americans in New York working on reparations. No FBA, no FBA anywhere. Not in the bureaucracy, not in the legal drafting phase of any of the legislation. No FBA is sitting on as a scholar, as a historian. So all of this is the stuff that you would think you would be doing since you're so passionate about reparations. And you have apparently zero follow through. Exactly. Shabaka says, crying and complaining, sitting on the couch, doing nothing. Delineate from what? Delineate for what? What we need is unity and organizations, not 3 letters. Slick Nick, I don't know. Well, Slick Nick, I don't know if, are you melanated, my brother? Black. Aren't you tired, racist? If you don't want to hear Black people discuss Black topics in a Black forum, why do you come to a Black channel? PCH rides. Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso are Pan-African countries that are at war against Arabs and the West right now. They are fighting with live bullets and bombs, not just running their mouths like the FBA. Shout out to PCH rides. Shabaka says, we must delineate from being Negroes, pimps, and gangsters first. We must organize ourselves as serious men and women working for objectives and goals. Pan-Africanism is the solution worldwide. Now, I co-sign all of these comments. And again, the thing is, if FBA were serious, if FBA were more than a hate group, if FBA were more than a delineation cult, psyop, COINTEL program tactic, then they would be at least trying to work with serious organizers and politicians to achieve their goals. But the more you push them and ask them, what you discover is there is no goal. The talk is the goal. That's clear. Now, I may have one more statement. I may have one more clip before I get ready to get up out of here. We're going to bring this to a close. I want to talk. I want to talk a little bit about Milana Karenga. But let me see. So where does the good brother come up? Let me see where they say something about this brother. So this is okay. So here we go. Take off the screen, add back to the stage. So let's see what they say about the brother
Here,
Milana Karenga.
Malala Karenga.
And she can't even get his name right.
One of the biggest ops in Black America. Kwanzaa was created by the FBA and I think the CIA. That's not a real holiday. It was manufactured by the American government because he's an op. He's always been.
All right, I'm gonna pause there because I do want to make some comments about this. Like I said, I'd never be able to wholeheartedly, full scale co-sign Dana. She gets a few things right, she gets a whole lot of stuff wrong, and here she got a whole lot of stuff wrong. She says, speaking of the CIA and infiltrating, a lot of y'all Black people still celebrate Kwanzaa. And Milana Karenga was one of the biggest ops in Black America. Kwanzaa was created by the FBI. I think she says FBA mistakenly. And the CIA. She says it's not a real holiday. So let's do some cleaning up. It's misleading at the least. Now, Dr. Milana Karenga founded Kwanzaa in 1966 through his organization called US. Hell, even Ice Cube had a song called Us. Now, that part is real history. That's not government. That's not CIA. That's not FBI. Now, separately, because that was in 1966. In 1970, there was an FBI memo that confirmed COINTELPRO deliberately sought to divide, sought to seek division, to sow conflict, and to fan it and make it mushroom between the US organization and the Black Panther Party. That's real. That's that confusion. That's that division. Now, there was a former LAPD informant who alleged that police supported US organization members instead of the Black Panthers. That still doesn't mean what she is saying. Now, Dr. Milana Karenga was convicted in 1971 of felony assault and torture. That's not what happens to FBI informants. You don't go to jail after you've done the do. You get rewards. No documentation has been found establishing that Karenga himself was a paid informant, was on the payroll. So that specific claim, mythology at best, is unverified. It has nothing to do with the real story about COINTELPRO manipulating everybody's organizations. COINTELPRO, and this is why it's ridiculous for somebody to get upset that Professor Small says we don't know how much government involvement is in this FBA thing. The government involvement, the COINTELPRO, the FBI, the CIA, if they were in the ranks of the Nation of Islam, Black Panther Party, if they were in the ranks of the US organization, if they were in the ranks of the Civil Rights, Martin Luther King Jr. organizations and SNCC and CORE, they in everything. But you won't get mad because he says they probably in the FBA too. Something ain't right if you can't deal with standard historical facts. And so This section here trying to dishonor Dr. Malana Karenga, trying to discredit Kwanzaa. It's the weakest thing in her whole video. It's the least defensible claim in her whole video. COINTELPRO exploiting an organization is not the same claim as the government manufacturing a holiday. Collapsing the two is exactly the kind of move we've come to know as FBA jibberjash. Now, let me say this, even for argument's sake, if I play devil's advocate. So let's say Karenga has some CIA connection. What did Kwanzaa itself actually do to Black people? Again, I'm talking about this litmus test. Does Kwanzaa divide us, help us get conquered? Does Kwanzaa isolate us? No, Kwanzaa teaches unity. So if we compare the zeitgeist that comes off of Kwanzaa and the zeitgeist that comes off of FBA, remember the litmus test is xenophobia. The litmus test is division. The litmus test is isolationism. Does Kwanzaa put us in a corner and say we can't mess with nobody else? Or does FBA do that? See, again, I don't have a problem if you want to criticize Dr. Malana Karenga. Plenty of people have criticized him. The Black Panthers criticized him. Plenty of people criticized Malcolm X. Plenty of people have criticized MLK. Criticism is fair game. Again, Professor Smalls criticized FBA and everybody's pissed, but criticism is part of the game. So that's not what I'm upset about. That's not what I take issue with. My problem is with the metric itself, the litmus test. Now you can look at Tariq's own movement. You clearly see division. You clearly see confusion. And if you say that it's not division, and if you say that it's not confusion, then explain to me how half of FBA, according to Tariq Nasheed, are tethers, and half of FBA, according to Tariq Nasheed, are not tethers. Tariq Nasheed's own children are tethers, according to Tariq Nasheed's definition. And you don't, if you say, well, Tariq's not our leader, do you have your own definition of tether? No, you took the one that he gave you. That's a clear example of division and confusion. And it points to the fact that division and confusion is the brand. It's the goal. So yes, differences existed between Karenga's group and other Black Power organizations. And yes, there was friction specifically with the Panthers. But differences alone don't make something a CIA program. Any more than differences between Malcolm X and Martin Luther King made them government assets or CIA or fake holiday makers. Confusion and division as the operating metric is the point. Now, again, I don't mind a real critique of Dr. Malana Karenga. I don't mind a real critique of the Kwanzaa holiday festival or the Nguzo Saba principles. But at least be consistent. Nearly every holiday on the United States calendar is made up. Nearly every holiday on the United States calendar is commercialized. The goal of American economics, commercialism, is buy and sell. Once any holiday gets put on the calendar, the businesses begin planning, how do we get your money on this day? That doesn't make it CIA. If it does, Christmas is a CIA op for all you Christians. So to Dana's implied point that at least Tariq gave you a new holiday celebrating your lineage, if that even ever takes off. If it does take off, people would just be buying merchandise for that holiday too. Now again, like I said, it's fair game to criticize Dr. Malana Karenga and the holiday, just like it's fair game to criticize Tariq Nasheed's holiday, whatever it's called. I can't pronounce it, and I'm not even going to try. But if you're trying to say that because people participate in it and because it has been commercialized, that discredits it, whether you call it fake, manufactured, or what have you, then you have to hold that metric stick to every holiday. Now, if you hold it to every holiday, I'm not necessarily mad at you. What was it? That brother, and I'm gonna get his name wrong. Barashango. That brother Barashango wrote one or two. I think it was either 2 or 3 books on the genocidal history and nature of European holidays. So if you say I'm against all holidays, okay. But if you're going to run around here and if you're going to celebrate Juneteenth and you're going to celebrate Christmas and you're going to celebrate Thanksgiving, then leave Kwanzaa alone. Because participating in your African American experience, especially under this country's regime, and honoring your African heritage are two things that were never in competition to begin with. Only the FBA make this point. Only the FBA try to make this straw man argument that you can't have one without the other. Now, I might say this. A lot of people didn't know that Karenga's history was challenging. But they don't know this because they don't read. It's all out there. It's not hidden information. It ain't one of them hidden colors. It's all documented. You just have to pick up a book and get to the end of it before drawing a conclusion. Now, I don't believe that Dr. Malana Karenga's a clean-cut hero. I don't believe he's a clean-cut villain. But I can't hand wave away. I can't discard, discredit, denounce his actual documented positive impact on the Black community, on Black information, Black knowledge, in spite of the documented conflict with the Panthers. And if I wanted to, then it is incumbent upon me to do the reading first and not to mouth off nonsense. So again, that's my piece about Dr. Malana Karenga, the Nguzo Saba, and Kwanzaa. And again, I don't remember people trying to force you to participate in Kwanzaa. Some people do, some people don't. Now, PCH Rise says FBA is selling wolf tickets for safe seats in their living rooms. That's it, and that's all. Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso are putting in the real work 24/7. Lighten that up. Exactly. Says be active. Tony Smith. HR 40 has been sitting on the shelf for 40 years while the Democrats have been pandering to immigrants. Stop misleading the people. Here you go. I appreciate that comment, Tony Smith. And I appreciate it for one particular point. A brother came into my comment section a couple of months ago with that exact same talking point. So it's kind of funny because it's kind of funny that the cult keeps coming with the same talking point. Now, the factual history of HR 40 shows that the Republicans have blocked HR 40 for the 40 years. Every time it comes up for a vote, Republicans block it. And the Republicans are still in charge of the committee that determines whether or not it goes to the floor. The one time Democrats were in charge of that committee, it didn't make it to a vote because there were some sellout Democrats, but the bulk of the Democrats voted for it. So again, there's always a group of sellout Democrats. They just voted. There's not the same ones, but there's a group of sellout Democrats who even today, I think it was yesterday, voted to merge the United States military with Israel's military in some weird thing. And even all of the hawks are like, wait a minute, that means we're subservient to them? They run our military? It got through because Republicans and 5 or 6 sellout Democrats. So again, if you got 200 some odd, if you got 250 some odd Democrats that vote yes for something, but they needed 259, and that other small little group said no, yeah, you can say the Democrats weren't able to get it passed, but it's because of one group of sellouts. That's the group you're supposed to be primarying. That's the group you're supposed to be getting rid of. Not, well, we just gonna get rid of all of the immigrants. The immigrant blacks voted for the bill. It was some very choice and select white Democrats that didn't vote for the bill. That's who you're supposed to get rid of, because the immigrant blacks in Congress keep voting yes for the reparations, for HR 40. But again, you wouldn't know anything about that because Tariq didn't tell you that. So let's see. PCH Rides. Thank you. You are 100% correct. No, Shabaka says that too, PCH Rides. Kevin, she gets all her information about Karenga and Kwanzaa by Judge Joe Brown. Well, don't that tell you something? Shabaka says Kwanzaa was invented by the African people. Yes, it was. It was at least based on Dr. Malana Karenga discusses it and talks about it in the book that he wrote about it. And Kwanzaa lasts for 7 days. It starts on December 26th and goes to January 1st. Pro-woman in the House, even during World Cup soccer, Black American ISO Speed received monkey racial slurs, just like Africans and Afro-Caribbean or Afro-European players. Can we unite against a common problem? Shout out to pro-woman for seeing and understanding and speaking the truth. All of us can except the FBA. Unfortunately. And I say that because almost every segment of the African American community, most segments of the Caribbean community, and I don't know if I can say most segments of, but many people across the continent of Africa are of the same mind that we are a common people with a common enemy, and we need to work in concert in order to achieve our goals. It is the FBA crowd, though they be loud, but it is only the FBA crowd that denounces all of that. Now we can talk about it. And again, what I keep saying is, I am not here to convince the FBA that they are wrong. I already know I'm not a cult deprogrammer, so I can't convince them that they're wrong. I'm here to set the record straight. My biggest goal is just to some extent to be a person who presents the facts, especially when FBA creates a false narrative. Now, I would love it if you agree with me. But at the very least, I hope that you see, I hope that you understand that my point is complete unity is impossible. Complete solidarity is indeed impossible. But we must always take chances and take opportunities to push back against false narratives. Mr. K says, it makes you wonder, how does Judge Joe Brown know everyone and always was everywhere? Like your cousin said. Yeah, I know. I'm like, the more I dig deep into Dana with her videos, and the more I hear Judge Joe Brown, I'm like, that man got some psychic abilities. or a time traveler or something. See, so Tony Smith says they're in everything except Pan-African. Okay, whatever, because he can't qualify that anyhow. Shabaka says COINTELPRO destroyed the organizations of the 60s and 70s and beyond. Kwanzaa is still a positive celebration. Kwanzaa was unity. Kwanzaa is unity. Indeed. Let's see. Again, Tony Smith with the cult talking points. Shabaka says Professor Small smelled a duck. Mr. K says, to Tony Smith, Mr. K says, what can you do to help Pan-Africanism? He can't do anything. He doesn't even want to do anything. And the fact that he says, again, it bears repeating, but sometimes it doesn't bear repeating. Pan-Africanism has its own receipts. It stands so clear as day. And I forgot somebody else was dropping receipts left and right in the chat about all of the different Pan-Africanists who have aligned with and sided with and assisted African Americans since they've been over here, in addition to the list that I gave. So anybody still saying that, you're clearly either a bot or a cult member or CIA op. PCH Rides says to Shabaka, exactly. 3 letters in the name and noise alone won't change a damn thing. They need to stop fooling themselves. That echo chamber of noise they're in won't change a damn thing. Exactly. Mr. K says, can't even help themselves, let alone black nationalism or Pan-Africanism. FBAs can't help anybody. Pro-woman. Actually, many Panthers had beef with Karenga and cultural nationalists and Afrocentrists. Called them pork chop Negroes, disagreed with their apolitical approach to injustices. I agree with, I understand that. I think I didn't specify, but I said something about that there were differences, but none of those differences mean that one or the other organization was CIA. But there's always been differences amongst our leaders and organizations. If you do any detailed historical view, you will see every step of the way there have been something along the lines of integration thinking, something along the lines of assimilation thinking, and something along the lines of more rebellious or separation thinking in the African American community as to what goes. There's always been this move to separate. There's always been this move with insistence to stay and fight. There's always been this move to leave entirely. So again, that's partly why I say I'm not castigating the FBA based on the idea or the principle of their identity. I'm castigating them based on the idea and the principle of their xenophobia and their lies. So let me see what else is going on in the chat before we wrap it up. Shabaka says Tariq has done nothing except line his own pockets, my brother. Shabaka says, long live Brother Barashongo. Indeed. And Deep Jones says FBA are delusional. Tony Smith says, to Mr. K, this is my first and last time here. Woohoo! I'll leave you Pan-Africanists alone with this talking. Okay. Shabaka says Karenga came from the streets. Let's see what else is going on. Shout out to everybody. Again, shout out to everybody in the world of TikTok. I appreciate you for listening. I'm getting ready to close this out. Let me see. Qzier says El Haj Malik El Shabazz was Detroit Red before he was Malcolm X. We learn from the rough roads that we travel in order to evolve into a better person. This is true. This is true. So let me see what else is going on. Mr. K says Assata Shakur even had differences with the Panthers because she felt they lacked an African consciousness. So again, and I'll even say this, the Black Liberation Army had issues with the Panthers. So again, there's this notion, there's this idea that there is such a thing as total unity. That's not what any realistic person who is trying to push our people in the right direction, that's not what we're saying. That's a misconception. It's not about total unity. It's not about total solidarity. It's not about conformity. It's about standing on truth, standing on principles. And again, so even with as the idea, as the premise, that's why FBA is a problem. They don't have a truth that is backed by facts. They have a feeling, and none of their feelings can be substantiated with facts and truth. Now, in the grown-up world, you're supposed to discard feelings once you have factual evidence that they don't make any sense. Indeed, Kwame Ture didn't leave the Panther Party happily. There was a struggle. This is, again, that's truth and facts. So again, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, please, if you're still here, make sure you hit the like button, share, subscribe if you haven't already. I know we got a few people in here saying, I ain't never coming back. Well, if you are a troll, I don't want you to come back. If you have an open mind, I hope you do hop back in here next week, Tuesday, 5 p.m. I go live Tuesdays and Thursdays at 5 p.m. That's my time. I may cover that reparations legislation next week. At least maybe I ain't gonna go like 2 hours on it or whatever, but I may bring that up as a possible segment, since somebody says that it ain't in there. You said it wrong. But again, this is your brother Shabazz, sometimes Professor Shabazz, but I am thankfully retired. You can catch me on Tuesdays and Thursdays here on YouTube. I simulcast on TikTok, Facebook, Twitch, and sometimes Instagram. But if you want to hear all the videos that get made and be more live in the conversation, you need to come to youtube.com/@theproperperspective. And @ is the symbol, not the words. Thank you for showing up. Thank you for listening. Thank you for keeping my chat live and direct. Shout out to Shabaka. Enjoyed the podcast. Pan-Africanism is a solution. I'm going to see y'all next week. Shabazz, break it down with the proper perspective.
The proper perspective.
So much controversy and a lot of deception. You don't know who's coming through with the light and reflection, and whose mouth is mumbling, trick knowledge deceptive. Shabazz, break it down with the proper perspective. So